everyone, it's Susan Jones and welcome back to my Sunday Spotlight. In case you are new here, I am a former first grade and K-2 literacy teacher who spent many years in the classroom but now spends a lot of time here on YouTube sharing some quick tips, ideas, and activities that you can take and use in your primary classroom right away. I've been getting a lot of the following question throughout the last month or so since maybe school has started. And the question is, how can I run centers in my socially distanced classroom? So I went ahead and I compiled some ideas from teachers in the classroom right now, as well as some ideas that I was thinking of off the top of my head, and if I were in the classroom right now, what I might do. So I'm here to share 3 different tips on running centers in a socially distanced classroom. Let's go. Tip I have for you is in regards to storage. Now, there seems to be 2 main ways that teachers are storing student materials to help them, not touch everything in the classroom like we normally would and try to keep the germs a little bit at bay if we can. The first way seems to be the more common way that I see is teachers are doing individual little bins, either with pencil pouches like these, or they're doing like those little bins that you can get from the dollar store to store all the materials that a student would need on a regular basis, especially for centers. So there might be, a pack of crayons in there, some markers, dice, cubes, whatever type of centers or materials that you think you'll need for your centers. Now, my favorite option for individual bins are actually food prep containers, because they are super cheap, and I know you can get similar type things at the dollar store, but these restaurant grade food containers are actually really great quality, and you can get a pack of like 50 of them for like $12 on Amazon. Not that you need 50, but I'll go ahead and link these down in the description. You can get more or less, and maybe you want to get 50 and use the leftovers for actual food prep like I use them for. But like I said, within there you might have some cubes for your students, a pack of cards, some dice, any like laminated materials that the students will individually be using during that center. And that just helps with the overall, spreading of germs. Now, the second way I am seeing materials being stored is through a shared bin of some kind. This is what's happening in my son's pre-K classroom. They actually sit with 2 kids at a table. They're pretty far apart, and I know some of you have, there's different restrictions everywhere. And so I've heard from many of you that you're allowed to have 2 or 3 kids together in a center at one time. And so with things like that where you can have a couple kids using the materials, what I would do is, in the past I've had math bins that look like these, and during math time, there'd be 10 bins out there. So students would be constantly going in and out and taking out the center, using it, putting it back, all within the same time period. Unfortunately, due to germs and whatnot, that's not really the case that can happen right now. But you could still have those 10 math tubs, or however many math tubs you have, or literacy centers, it all works the same. And what you would do is you would have one of the tubs, and it could be one individual center. Everything you need for that center is in the tub. And students would use that throughout the week. And what I would do is I would have some leftover ones. So that way your students can rotate through the tubs to make sure that at least for a week, or at least for, 3 days, that only the same 2 or 3 students are touching the materials at one time. And now you can either go ahead and sanitize everything, which might be a little difficult. You can sanitize it all before, switching bins to different groups, or you can go ahead and just have like a timeout or a quarantine station. And if you just leave the materials over there for a week, let's say, then all the germs should die off, and then you can go ahead and put it back in the rotation. So those are the 2 main ways I would say in a K-2 classroom. I'm hearing a lot more of the individual type of storage containers. And then in pre-K and some of those kindergarten teachers, I'm hearing that they are able to do the shared containers. If you have a good storage solution for centers during this time, please go ahead and drop it in the comments down below. You'll know if you've been here that I love reading your comments. I love for other teachers to be able to read your comments. It's like one big think tank down there where we can all just collaborate and get ideas from each other. All right, tip number 2 for socially distanced centers is going to be all about how to get your students to still play together even if they have to play individually. So if they're not allowed to, meet at a group and do centers together, but you still want your students, interacting and playing games together, I'm gonna share a couple of ways that students can do that. First, I do wanna let you know that one of my last videos, I actually shared 2 math games that you can play while socially distancing, and all you need is a deck of cards. So this is what the video looks like. Go ahead and watch this after this video ends. And one is a small group game that you can play, and you can also play it whole group as well. And the other is actually a partner game, and students can sit pretty far apart. They're at their own desk, they have their own deck of cards, and they can still play together, so it's a lot of fun. Now for some other games that students can play, together while remaining separate, I have this sight word treasure hunt game that is one of my absolute favorites. And if your students are, practicing sight words, which many of my K-2 teachers, I know you're doing, this is a great one. They actually sit across from each other. You can put up a little divider, but it's kind of like a battleship type game. I do have a video where I explain exactly how to play this, and I actually have all the sight word cards available on TPT, but you can take that same exact idea. So if you watch this video as well, after this one, you can see how to play, and then you can play with other skills too. It's a really great one. Like I said, they just face each other, you put up a little divider, and they have to try to find the hidden treasure. Now in my center tubs, I would always have my print and play partner games. I have about 48 different math games, 42 different phonics games. They all work on different skills. And even last year, I just made a bunch of sight word print and play games as well. And they were always perfect to play with a partner. So those games usually had one game board, and then all you would need is like a dice or some cubes or maybe a paper clip to spin. And in order to continue playing those games, but separately, you can still do the same thing. Some of them do have 2 different game boards, so students could sit either facing each other like that treasure hunt game, or they could sit, 3 to 6 feet apart, however far you need them to be, and they could still play together. But also, you could go ahead and just print the game board out twice. So if you wanted to go ahead and print that game board out 2 times, each player would have their own game board. And about 90% of those games, each player picks like a different color crayon. So that way if they're coloring something in or whatever they're doing, you can tell who is who. And you could still do that. So let's say player 1 is red and player 2 is blue. You would just have each student have both color crayons on their desk. And then they would still take turns playing together. But when player 2 would go, the other player, and they would color in, the sum of 8, I'm just giving an example, then you would go ahead and color in the sum of 8 with their color too. So you're still playing the same game together, and you're just actually marking off both on the game board so you can keep track of who is winning. And also many of those game boards are set up like this, where it's player 1 on this side, player 2 on this side. So realistically, you could just take some scissors and cut that right up the middle, separate it. They can sit at their own desk and still play together. And tip number 3 that I have for you is just about individual centers. Maybe your district is super strict or the regulations are pretty tough and you just cannot find a way for your students to play together or socialize during this time. So individual centers is going to be where it's at. Now, thankfully, there are so many free centers that you can go ahead and print out. Students can cut them out. If you wanted to laminate and store them, you could if you wanted to. And there's tons of free ones over on TPT. Like here is one that I have. It's called Pumpkin Patch Number Match. And students basically just go ahead and match the number with the matching tens frames, and it's a little pumpkin theme for October. I will link this down in the description, but there's a ton of these type of hands-on centers that you could go ahead and give to your students, and they could still do it individually. If I were doing these individual centers, I would definitely have them keep it in their storage bin for at least a week or 2. And if they finish a different activity throughout the day, they can go in and complete that center on their own time while they wait for everyone else to finish. Another individual center that I absolutely love and is highly engaging are these Solvent games that I made. I have a bunch of them for different math topics, and I got the idea from when I went to an escape room a few years ago, and you had this similar kind of crack the code type activity. So how this works is every student will get a spinner that looks like this, and then they'll get a sheet that looks like this, and there's a bunch of different sheets within each unit. So each student could get their own sheet that's entirely different. Up in the corner, there's a little code, and that code tells you where you have to start your spinner. And then there's a bunch of different problems, like in this one, this is an addition one. So students have to solve the sum, and then they go ahead and look on the spinner to find that matching sum to see what letter they have to write. And at the end, after they go ahead and solve it, they crack the code. It says a sentence that makes sense, and then they can illustrate it. It is so much fun, and I have them for a bunch of different skills. So if I were in the classroom, that is definitely one I would add to the mix. Now, if you happen to have technology in your classroom, that's going to be a great independent center. Thankfully, kids with iPads or tablets or whatever, they're usually pretty engaging. So there's tons of digital resources that teacher authors like myself are creating for you guys. So you can go ahead and use them either through distance learning or in the classroom as well. I have a bunch of cover-up games that look like this. I have some beginning reading comprehension passages. And last spring, my husband actually made this website that's called Real or Nonsense Word Factory. And it looks like this. This is how you play. We made this super cheap, so it's actually only $3. And once you purchase it, you will get immediate access to this website right here. And all students will do is spin a CVC word. It will put it together, and they have to say if it is real or nonsense. So it's just a little website that they can use over and over, and it randomizes a bunch of different CVC words with different vowels in the middle. And the last individual center that I want to share is Read or Write the Room. It is one of my absolute favorites, and it's already socially distanced because everybody, does it by themselves. So the way these games work is you go ahead and cut out the little strips or whatever skill they're working on, and you actually just tape them around your room. And then students will walk around with a clipboard and their paper, and they have to go find each one. So of course, socially distanced, I would tell them if somebody is already at a card, you don't go over to it. You wait your turn, and then you can find one on your own. So they go over, they solve the problem, and they write it in the matching spot on their sheet. I actually have in my first grade math centers, I made one for every single month with differing skills that, are supposed to go along throughout the year. So it starts with number sense, we go into addition, subtraction, etc. But any sort of read or write the room activity is another great one to use during this weird social distance time. So there you have tips for doing centers in a socially distanced classroom. I gave you some storage tips, some ideas on games that you can play together while remaining socially distanced, and then some other ideas for some independent centers that I would definitely use in the classroom. If you like this video, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel so you can get every new week's video, and click that bell. That will get you an email every single time I upload a new video, so you'll never miss any. See you next Sunday. Bye.